World War I, also known as the Great War, was a global conflict of unprecedented scale. It involved more than 70 million military personnel, including 60 million Europeans, making it one of the largest wars in history. It raged from 1914 to 1918, engulfing Europe and extending its reach to Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. The war saw battles fought in diverse terrains, from the deserts of the Middle East to the jungles of Africa and the icy waters of the North Atlantic. The war shattered empires, redrew national boundaries, and left an indelible mark on the 20th century. Cities were reduced to rubble, and entire generations were lost to the carnage. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, sought to bring an end to the hostilities but also sowed the seeds for future conflicts. Its causes were complex, a tangled web of alliances, imperial ambitions, and nationalist fervor. The intricate system of alliances meant that a conflict between two countries could quickly involve others, turning a regional dispute into a global war. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914, provided the spark that ignited the powder keg. This single event set off a chain reaction of alliances being called into action, leading to a full-scale war. The world watched in disbelief as the fragile peace unraveled. People who had never known war in their lifetime suddenly found themselves in the midst of a global conflict. Diplomatic efforts failed to contain the crisis, and within weeks, Europe's great powers were at war. The failure of diplomacy highlighted the deep-seated tensions and mistrust between nations. The conflict pitted the Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria, against the Allied powers, Great Britain, France, Russia, Italy, and eventually the United States. Each side believed in the righteousness of their cause, leading to a prolonged and brutal conflict. The world had never seen a war of such magnitude, and the horrors that unfolded would forever change the course of human history. Trench warfare became a symbol of the war's brutality, with soldiers enduring unimaginable conditions. The impact of World War I extended far beyond the battlefields. The war led to significant political changes, including the fall of monarchies in Russia, Germany, and Austria-Hungary. It led to the collapse of empires, the rise of new ideologies, and profound social and technological changes. The Russian Revolution of 1917, for instance, brought about the rise of communism, which would shape global politics for the rest of the century. The war also had a devastating human cost, claiming the lives of millions of soldiers and civilians. The psychological scars left on those who survived were deep and lasting, giving rise to what we now know as post-traumatic stress disorder. Its legacy continues to shape our world today, a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the enduring consequences of conflict. Memorials and commemorations serve as poignant reminders of the sacrifices made and the lessons learned from this devastating chapter in human history. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife Sophie in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914, was the catalyst for World War I. This tragic event shocked the world and set off a series of reactions that would lead to one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. The couple was on a goodwill visit to Sarajevo, hoping to ease tensions in the region, but their visit ended in bloodshed. The assassination was carried out by Gavrilo Princip, a member of the Black Hand, a Serbian nationalist group. Princip and his co-conspirators were part of a larger movement that sought to challenge the Austro-Hungarian Empire's control over the Balkans. The Black Hand was a secret military society that used terrorism and assassination to achieve its goals, believing that violence was the only way to achieve political change. The Black Hand sought to unite all South Slavs, including those living under Austro-Hungarian rule, into a single Yugoslav nation. This vision of a united South Slavic state was driven by a deep sense of nationalism and a desire for self-determination. The group's activities were part of a broader wave of nationalist movements sweeping across Europe at the time, challenging the old empires and seeking to redraw the map of the continent. Austria-Hungary, outraged by the assassination, blamed Serbia for the act and issued an ultimatum demanding satisfaction. The ultimatum included a series of harsh demands that were designed to be unacceptable, giving Austria-Hungary a pretext to go to war. The assassination provided the Austro-Hungarian government with the opportunity it had been seeking to crush Serbian nationalism and assert its dominance in the Balkans. Serbia, backed by Russia, refused to comply with all of Austria-Hungary's demands. Russia, seeing itself as the protector of Slavic peoples, was determined to support Serbia and counter Austro-Hungarian aggression. This refusal set the stage for a broader conflict as the alliances and rivalries of the great powers began to come into play. On July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, setting in motion a chain reaction that would draw the great powers of Europe into a catastrophic war. The declaration of war was followed by a series of mobilizations and declarations of war by other nations, each bound by their alliances and treaties. What began as a regional conflict quickly escalated into a full-scale world war. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was not the sole cause of World War I, but it served as the immediate trigger. The tensions and rivalries that had been building for decades finally erupted, and the world was plunged into a conflict that would reshape the political landscape of Europe and beyond. The underlying causes of the war were complex and multifaceted, rooted in decades of European history. These included rising nationalism, imperial rivalries, and the competition for colonies and resources. The major powers of Europe were engaged in a struggle for dominance, and the assassination provided the spark that ignited these simmering tensions. A complex web of alliances, which had been formed to provide security but ultimately created a situation where a conflict between two nations could quickly involve many others. These alliances were meant to deter aggression, but they also meant that any conflict had the potential to escalate rapidly, and a pervasive atmosphere of militarism. The major powers had been building up their military forces and preparing for war for years, creating a sense of inevitability about the coming conflict. The belief in the necessity and glory of war was widespread, and the assassination provided the justification for unleashing these military forces. The assassination, however, provided the spark that ignited the powder keg, setting in motion a chain of events that would have devastating consequences for the world. The war that followed would lead to unprecedented destruction and loss of life, and its effects would be felt for generations to come. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand remains a powerful reminder of how a single event can change the course of history. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand on June 28, 1914 in Sarajevo was the spark that ignited a complex web of alliances and tensions that had been building for years. This single event rapidly escalated the crisis into a full-blown war, as nations were drawn into the conflict through their various treaties and agreements. Austria-Hungary, determined to punish Serbia for the assassination, sought assurances of support from its powerful ally, Germany. The leaders in Vienna believed that a strong response was necessary to maintain their empire's prestige and stability. Germany, under Kaiser Wilhelm II, was eager to assert its dominance in Europe and saw the crisis as an opportunity. They issued Austria-Hungary a blank check, essentially pledging its unconditional support, which emboldened Austria-Hungary to take a hard line against Serbia. With Germany's backing, Austria-Hungary issued Serbia an ultimatum on July 23, 1914, containing deliberately unacceptable demands. The ultimatum was designed to be rejected, providing a pretext for war. Serbia, fearing invasion and unable to meet all the demands, sought assistance from its ally, Russia. The Serbian government knew that without support, they would be unable to withstand an Austro-Hungarian attack. Russia, bound by treaty and a sense of Slavic solidarity with Serbia, began mobilizing its troops in support of Serbia. Tsar Nicholas II faced immense pressure to act, both from his advisors and the Russian public. This mobilization was seen as a direct threat by Germany, which had its own strategic concerns. On August 1, 1914, Germany declared war on Russia, setting off a chain reaction among the European powers. Germany's declaration of war on Russia triggered a series of alliances and treaties. France, bound by its treaty to Russia, began its own military preparations, knowing that it would soon be drawn into the conflict. On August 3, 1914, France declared war on Germany, fulfilling its obligations to Russia and preparing for the inevitable German invasion. Germany, following its Schlieffen Plan, a military strategy designed to avoid a two-front war by quickly defeating France before turning east to Russia, invaded neutral Belgium on August 4, 1914. This invasion was intended to allow German forces to bypass the heavily fortified French-German border. Britain, outraged by Germany's violation of Belgian neutrality and bound by its own treaty obligations to protect Belgium, declared war on Germany on August 4, 1914. The British public and government were united in their resolve to oppose German aggression. Within a week, Europe was at war. The great powers, entangled in a web of alliances and mutual defense pacts, were now locked in a deadly embrace. The declarations of war spread rapidly, pulling more nations into the conflict. The world watched in horror as the fragile peace crumbled. The continent descended into the abyss of war, with civilians and soldiers alike facing unprecedented destruction and chaos. The early days of World War I set the stage for a prolonged and devastating conflict that would reshape the world. World War I witnessed the emergence of a new and brutal form of warfare, trench warfare. On the Western Front, a 400-mile-long line of trenches stretched from the English Channel to Switzerland. Soldiers on both sides dug into the earth, seeking protection from the relentless enemy fire. The trenches, muddy, rat-infested, and disease-ridden, became symbols of the war's brutality. Life in the trenches was a nightmare. Soldiers endured constant shelling, machine gun fire, and the terror of sniper attacks. The stench of death and decay permeated the air. Disease was rampant, and medical care was often inadequate. The psychological toll of trench warfare was immense, leaving many soldiers with shell shock, a condition we now recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Despite the horrors of trench warfare, soldiers on both sides displayed remarkable courage and resilience. They formed strong bonds of comradeship, finding solace in shared experiences and mutual support. The stalemate of trench warfare led to some of the war's most iconic and tragic battles, including the Battle of the Somme in 1916, where over 1 million men were killed or wounded.